This is Heidi Freitager-Kirkaldy from FastPitch Online Showcase. And today we're doing a webinar on 5 things you can do to get on coaches' recruiting radars. A lot of you probably know me from coaching. I've coached in the ACC the last 8 years, and I've been in college coaching for 13 years overall. And I've got a lot of knowledge from that process on how I went about recruiting kids. And then also prior to that, I was also a high school and travel ball coach. And so I kind of, as a former athlete and then a travel and high school coach, and then on to college coaching, I kind of have a 360-degree view of how the recruiting process works and how it really pays off when you know the right people and do the right things and take the right steps to get everything going. So that's kind of what we wanted to address here with this. And as we go along, please feel free to continue chatting and asking questions. And then once we get to the end, once we cover everything, we're going to go through a Q&A. Hopefully you'll think of some questions as we go along. Please do not be shy. We're here to kind of help you through this process and hopefully get some good information out to you. So as we start this, you'll notice we've got the radar. At the center of everything is understanding how the recruiting process works from our point of view as a college coach. So as a former Division I coach, I can now kind of tell you the view that we had on this process. And people always ask us, what can we do to get in front of you? What can we do to make you wanna watch this particular student athlete play? And what we always kind of thought about was, how are we going to go about researching players? How am I going to find the best players in the country? And if you think about it, every program is looking for, probably in every class, 4 or 5 of the best that they can get into their school to compete for their program. So it becomes a research process. And I tell student athletes all the time to think about it just like doing a research paper for school. You're not just going to look at one piece of information. You're not going to look at one entity to get all of your information. You're not just going to use Google. You're probably going to ask some people how they would go about finding things. You're probably going to do maybe some testing. You're going to go out and kind of find different areas that you think will help you in terms of information. So whether that's attending travel games, whether that's attending camps, whether that's high school games, we kind of do a little bit of everything. And then we also rely on each other a lot, because I'll go up to a colleague of mine and say, hey, I'm looking for a pitcher in this particular class. Have you seen any that you think would fit my style? And if you have people that understand what you are looking for, it's really valuable in the process. Now, if it's somebody that does really understand what I need in my program and what I look for in my program, then I don't take that as advice as much as I would from somebody that really understands what I'm doing. So understand that that's kind of how we start this. So in order to get on that radar, number one thing you can do is be good at softball. It's the utmost important part for us in terms of our program. You have to be talented. And we talk to a lot of kids about organic marketing, and what organic marketing is. Um, it's almost like when you're on social media and one of your friends says, hey, I tried this product and I liked it, or I tried this service and I liked it. It's kind of like that. It's going around and getting references from people that you know and people that you trust, and saying, hey, I saw this kid play, she's really good. That's where honestly probably most of our information comes from. And then we get down to, what kind of coaches do we like in terms of their style, and who raises kids in the style that we kind of like to play in. And we kind of go to those coaches, more often than not, and try and get them to step in first and say, hey, I think this is a kid that would fit what you're looking for. And that's what organic marketing is. So if you're good at softball, I promise you it will bleed through. And as a kid myself, when I went through this process, I was very late in being recruited. I actually signed my Division I letter of intent after I graduated high school, and it came off of a umpire seeing me at a tournament. It's somebody that had seen me multiple times and said, hey, this, she's a good catcher. I like the way she works in front of me. She pitches a little bit, has some different skills to offer. And a college coach was late in the process. She was calling everybody she could, trying to find out where she could find somebody that could fill the spot she needed. And it turned out that she had the scholarship available because of somebody leaving the program. So then I was able to jump in and get that opportunity. So trust me when I say kind of what you're doing at all times makes a huge amount of difference in this process. So, just when you think people aren't looking at you, believe me, they are. And understand that your development is just as important as playing in good tournaments. So the kids that are continually getting better are going to stick out way more to us than somebody that just gets on a good team, but it's kind of a collection team that doesn't really develop. Development is very important to us because I know then that if I'm recruiting you at a younger age, I know that over time you're going to continue to get better. And that's super important. So be mindful of the people that you're choosing in terms of, raising your, you know, pitcher, raising your catcher, your hitter, no matter what it is, all those people that are coaching, you got to be mindful that they are very, very excellent at making kids better at the sport. And then the other part I like to say is challenge yourself. So I try to tell kids, try not to be the best player on your team at all times because you're going to get that in school ball. You're going to get that in different places where you may be the best player on that team. You want to kind of reach above and beyond and try to not always be the best player on your team so that you can have somebody to kind of push you along and you can push them along and you guys can get better and better together. And it's not necessarily I'm always the big fish in the small pond. You want to make sure that you are constantly challenging yourself in this process. Second thing I like to talk about is attending camps. So when we're talking about camps, there's different kinds of camps. So obviously, as a former college coach, I like the college camps because it helps. A lot of times, it helps fundraise for the program. It helps fundraise for the coaches. It helps get those kids in, and you kind of get to see what a day-to-day practice situation would be like, what a day-to-day process of the coaches is going to be like. So understand that, the college camps gives you a great idea of, am I going to like these people that are here at the school? Am I going to like those coaches that I would be dealing with? And then a lot of times you'll get an opportunity, whether it's related to the camp or not, to kind of walk around and see the college that you're at and feel what it's like a little bit to be there, and do you like the atmosphere and things like that. And then you have the showcase camps, which I think are becoming more and more used by you guys, and I think they're good to a certain extent, but sometimes, and we can kind of talk about the positives and negatives of both, but in showcase camps, typically you're run through a variety of different drills, and sometimes they're run by college coaches, sometimes they're run by kind of outside people, and the college coaches are more or less just there to watch and see everything. They're good value in terms of you're going to get a lot of college coaches seeing you, but then it's also what's the value of me seeing a kid field ground balls versus me seeing a kid in a game. So you've got to judge what that camp is going to do for you. But if there's a collection of college coaches that you want to be in front of, and it's a regional camp or something like that, sometimes those are a good idea as well. So you just have to kind of pick and choose, and in terms of what's important for you to know about those camps. Number one is the amount of money I'm paying. Is that going to be worth the return that I get from it? Whether it's, is it just one school seeing me, or is it more than one school? Is it my all-time, it's my number one favorite school, so I definitely want to get immersed in that school and see if I like it? then a college camp is great for that. If you're looking for, hey, I just want these coaches to kind of see me a little bit, which is pretty much what happens at showcase camps, because a lot of times we get, as a college coach, you get stuck on, one particular drill, and they have you teaching that to, a certain number of kids. And then the other important things you have to know are how many kids are at that camp, and how many times are you actually going to be interacting with, whether it's players or coaching staff. Uh, Typically, in some of the camps that I've gone to, sometimes you'll get as little as 30 seconds to see a kid hit, to see a kid field a ball, to see a kid throw. And that's tough for us to be making evaluations. So understand that out of these camps, we're typically not going to be recruiting you out of one of these camps. We're going to be taking that. It's just like a skills video. We're going to be taking that information and then going and finding out where you are, and then trying to go see you play. And is there anything that I can do to get more bang for my buck? It's making those phone calls and writing those emails and saying, hey, how many kids are going to be at this camp? Because I think in terms of, how many campers are there are going to make a huge difference. You also want to know if the people that you're wanting to see there are going to be there. There are some camps that you show up, especially college camps, and a head coach will show up for one day, kind of tip her or his hat and just say, hey, thank you for coming. And then that's really what they do at that camp. So you kind of have to know what you're getting for what you pay for. And it's okay to call and ask those questions. I fielded those questions a lot as an assistant coach, and it definitely didn't bother me. I think it made me happy to know that people knew kind of what they were doing and what the process was. And I was happy to share what we did and how we ran things, because, we thought we did it a good way. So just start asking those questions, and don't be shy about the process, because it is important that you are getting your money and time's worth. Next part of it is, we want you to plan a recognized travel team to get on somebody's radar. So you have to also relate this to your goals. So we talk about goals first. You have to understand, for your student athlete, what are the goals that you have out of the process? Is it to stay local? I want to play on a small college team that's close by. I want to play in this certain region. So let's say I want to play in the Northeast somewhere. I probably want to choose a team that's going to go to those areas. So if you're looking to play locally, then that means you can stay in a smaller travel team and probably just travel locally. Now, if you're looking at playing nationally, you're looking at, for example, I'm in Virginia. If I'm looking to play on the West Coast and I'm in Virginia, I'm probably going to have to go on a team that plays on the West Coast somewhere, so that I can get seen by those coaches, because typically coaches they don't travel across the country as much as you might think they would. And that's a huge part of it. So talk about your goals and be frank with the coaches that are kind of after you as a travel ball player, and say, well, these are the goals that I have. What are the goals that you have? And see if they mesh. Second part of this is, how do I know which teams are good? Typically, you can look up rankings and different things, and whether they're ASA, whether they're playing PGF, whether they're playing USSSA. You've got different ways to look up those rankings of which teams are good. And then you can also look at, they kind of break it down into regions as well. So make sure, and then you can ask questions too. I mean, it's kind of a recruiting process within the recruiting process of, ask parents that are available on that team, or kids that are on that team, hey, are you getting better by being on this team? Are you having a good experience? Are you, learning everything you think you want to learn from softball? Are you getting better in this? One of the questions that we get a lot of times is, are coaches watching my high school games? The issue that we have with watching high school games is that typically they are running concurrent to our season, unless you're in Georgia, Missouri, or Iowa. Those three play in different seasons other than ours. So it's a little bit easier to see their high school games. But in terms of us, seeing in Virginia, for example, seeing a Virginia high school team play, it's very hard because a lot of times either your practice or your game schedule is very similar to the playing schedule of your local high schools. So understand that we really have a hard time going to a lot of high school games. We like to see you playing that ball, and we like to see you leading the way with that ball. And the other challenge that we have is if we're comparing kids from across the country. So if I'm comparing somebody that's playing in Virginia to somebody that's playing in Florida, sometimes the quality of ball from state to state, region to region is very different. So it's hard to compare kids that way, and it's much easier for us to compare travel ball players and travel ball teams because of the heightened atmosphere of play. Next thing we like to talk about is shooting a skills video. So one of the big things, people ask us is, should I be shooting a skills video? When should I shoot it? Those types of things. I definitely think you should. And I think you want to make sure that you're getting it done by the right person, because having somebody that's qualified, that understands what a college coach is looking for is very key. Like just taking out an iPhone and shooting a couple things from a couple of different angles, if you got the wrong angle, it won't really show me how good you are as a pitcher or as a hitter or as a fielder. So understand that you have to know a little bit about what we're looking for mechanically, what we're looking for footwork wise, what we're looking for in terms of hands. You have to have somebody that understands what's going on. So sometimes the people that are shooting those locally are not always the best in terms of understanding what needs to be seen. So in terms of skills that you need to show, you definitely want to show kind of everything that you've got. And I say that, but then the caveat is I would not show things that I'm not good at. So for me, for example, I'm almost 6 feet tall. I'm not a fast kid. I'm not going to show myself, even though I've done it, screwing around. I wouldn't show myself slapping, for example. And we see that a lot, and we see people bunting and things like that. Those aren't the skills that necessarily are going to make me give you a scholarship for someone of my type. So what I would be showing of myself, I'd be showing hitting, I'd be showing throwing, I'd be showing some of my pitching skills and then some of my catching skills. And then allowing that coach, basically it's just a window of, hey, what am I looking for my team? If I check a few of those boxes for that particular coach, that's just meant to get a coach to come see me play somewhere. Understand that we're not going to be recruiting directly off of it. It's more so that I can get it in that coach's head and say, hey, you need to come see me play in a game, because those things are important. But in terms of those skills, you're throwing, you're hitting, you're pitching, you're catching, you're fielding, your footwork, and your speed. And if you have slapping skills, go ahead and show those. And the other thing we tell our clients is to make sure that you send it as an embedded link in your email. Very easy to put videos on YouTube now. And if you don't know how to do it technology-wise, someone at your school would definitely be able to help you do that. It's much easier for us as a coach if you email me and I just click on the link rather than having to type in a link, or sometimes the DVDs and things that we were getting in the mail, sometimes they're not direct formatting. So if I have a Mac, for example, and it was shot on a PC, sometimes they're not compatible. So having it in a YouTube type video server is much, much easier for us to access. And one of the other things we like to tell people to do is make sure you introduce yourself in person. So in this generation, we find that kids, they love to text, they love to email, but they don't like to talk, and they definitely don't like to have face-to-face meetings. And that's one of the big things. Once you come to us, you're going to have to be able to do that. So we encourage people to either call or go to the campus and set up things. A meeting with a coach on the campus, I can tell you as a Division I coach in the ACC, I bet we would maybe get one kid a month that would show up. and say, hey, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is the team I play for. I'm interested in your school. Can you talk to me for a few minutes? Obviously, you need to make sure that it's not during a dead period when you do this. But other than that, I mean, we welcome kids in. And I tell you what, the kids that went and made that effort, the one kid a month, I definitely would go out and figure out a way to go see them play. So doing that is huge to getting a coach to come see you. Another way we like to tell kids to do things is to go out and watch a team practice. So I think kids and their parents can get a great idea of whether their daughter will fit into that program, whether I, as a student athlete, will fit into that program. You kind of get to see the practice personalities, and that's where the work goes on. Understand that games are one thing. Practice is when, things are really coming together, and that's when the work is happening. Games is just the seeing the practice skills and everything come to fruition. So that's kind of the icing on the cake. The practice is where you're going to see, the personalities of players. You're going to see the personalities of coaches. You're going to see a lot more information, I think, than you will in a game sense. So watching a team practice, and generally, there's nobody there watching with you. Generally, it's just you and your parents, and that's it. And you're watching the team. And then afterward, you can go, meet the coach and say, hey, I'm, Susie, and I play for this team. And this is, thank you for letting me watch. And this is really what I want to do. So, it really helps them understand that you have an interest in who they are as a program. And you're also being able to measure, whether or not you'll fit into that program. Attending home games is great as well, and I say home games because, especially at the Division I level, we can't if we were playing at a different site, we wouldn't be able to greet kids and recruits at that site. We can only do that at home games and not during a dead period. So understand that, seeing those games, you're also going to have, a couple hundred kids and fans there. So it's a little bit more difficult, but it still shows that you're interested in their program, and still shows that, there's definitely a need to come see you. But, you've just gotten done with a real, probably emotional game. So understand that it's, sometimes you get lost in the shuffle a little bit more than those first two examples, but still great times to introduce yourself in person and get used to talking to an adult. That, not always the most comfortable thing. And I know for you guys, sometimes it's an intimidating process. You think we're, kind of crazy people, and, we're on TV and things like that. It's okay. We're people too, and we understand. We want you guys to be a part of this process, so that in the end, no matter where you choose to go to school, whether it's our school or another school, that you get a good experience from it. So, and part of all of this is to kind of show you guys, this is a small part of what FastPitch Online Showcase is. So FastPitch Online Showcase is run by former Division I softball coaches. And we basically got together and said, look, we want to be able to educate people on this process and make sure that they understand what they're getting into when it comes to recruiting. And what we do for our gold members, which you guys can check out on our website, which will come up in a minute. Basically, the gold members receive, there's an online class. So basically it guides you step by step to how to get recruited. And from the very first part of it to kind of researching colleges and things like that, all the way to the end when you're signing, and even after you sign, what you should be doing. There's a College Coach email database in there. There's an email generator that will help you kind of get your feet wet in writing emails to coaches. There's webinars like this on the entire recruiting process. There's consulting services available, which would be a direct line to a former Division I coach. And then there's also profile and video hosting available. So you guys can take a look at all of that information, and you'll get more webinars like this that are informative, and the ability to consult with us as a staff. So you can contact us at these two sites. We've got info at fastpitchonlineshowcase.com, or there's the toll-free number. It's 1-877-333-6613. Those are both available at fastpitchonlineshowcase.com as well. And you can also, you'll be able to email us directly as well, but you want to start there at info, and we will move forward from there. So this is kind of my good time now. I get to do a little bit of Q&A with you guys. So anything you want to ask, feel free to go ahead and ask it in that chat box or in the question box that are there. And then I will start with a couple of the ones that I received prior to this. So we've got, can a travel ball coach impact how an athlete is viewed or not viewed by recruiting college coaches at tournaments? And that's positively or negatively. I think absolutely a travel ball coach can impact how an athlete is viewed. Is it the entire part of my view? No, absolutely not. I can overlook some of the coaching and things like that. But it also tells me that, fit wise, it may be a bigger challenge sometimes for a kid to come into my program if they're playing for a certain style of coach that maybe I'm kind of diametrically opposed to. So it's a conversation that would definitely be had. But in terms of me, basing my decision on a particular travel ball coach, I definitely didn't do that. It definitely, you kind of have to step back from it and say, okay, what is this kid going to get out of playing for this coach? And are they going to get better? And are they going to continue to feel good about themselves and feel confident versus, if it's somebody that's a little bit more negative, is that going to hinder their growth a little bit? So I definitely do take a step back and look at that. But, in the grand scheme of things, it can affect some of the decisions that are made. Second question I have here is, if an athlete is shy or does not have a huge personality, what would some pointers be that could help them get noticed? I'll tell you what, I myself, when I was growing up, I was definitely a shy individual, and I kind of had to develop a bigger persona on the field just to show some of the leadership skills that I had. And, whether it was in the circle or behind the plate, I definitely had to show different things at different times. And I think the big things that we look for, you can recruit a quieter kid, but you also, you kind of follow them a little bit more deeply, I think sometimes, because even though they're not communicating verbally or, kind of outwardly, they will have an effect on their teammates. So that's when you'll see, like me as a recruiting coach, I would walk behind the dugout. I would typically try and find out who their parents were, and I would kind of hang out around them and make sure, that the parents and the child were kind of treating people the right way, because, and the old adage goes, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and it's lots of times very, very true. So we typically, when we're getting a quieter kid, we would do those types of things to kind of see, personality wise, were their teammates still drawn to them even though they weren't, super loud or super vocal on the field. But I definitely would encourage, such a player to get a little more vocal, to try to kind of step outside the box and on the field, kind of have a little persona on the field that maybe you don't have in your normal life, because that will definitely draw a little bit more of a look, I think, than the kids that are a little bit quieter. Another question we have, what is the biggest turnoff for college coaches when they're recruiting? When we're looking at that, there's, like I just mentioned, if the parent and the athlete are not good people, I tell you what, I have to spend, lots of time every week, at least 20 hours a week typically, dealing with a particular athlete, coaching that athlete, whether and they're in study hall and they're in meetings and things like that. So if I can't find a good person, it's going to be hard for me then to still, hey, it's a talented kid, but the kid's not a great kid. It's very tough for me to want to have that around me for 4 years. So understand that, having good people skills and having a good sense of being a good person, being a good teammate, being a good contributor to your university, those are things that are paramount in this process, just as much as the softball talent part of it. And I think another turnoff for me as a college coach was misinformation. So having people come in and kind of tell me, hey, I understand you guys don't recruit this type of player, or you've already verbally committed this particular kid, or you're recruiting this particular kid, and it oftentimes wasn't true. I think that was the hardest sometimes to understand with people, because you would hope that they would just contact you and say, hey, I'm really wondering about this. I really thought this was going to be a, a good process for us. So having that misinformation out there was always pretty challenging. So we'll get to some of the ones that you guys are asking online. Can you explain what an official visit is versus an unofficial visit? So an unofficial visit you can do at any time other than a dead period. And it can be in 8th grade, it can be 9th grade, 10th grade. But the difference is that you guys are paying the expenses, and that's pretty much it. Everything else is very similar. You can do as many unofficial visits as you want. So, and then when you get into official visits are the ones that occur during your senior year. And typically in softball, a lot of times kids are already, verbally committed, or they're even signed before they take their official visits. Official visits then have some or all of the visit paid for by the institution. So they'll go and, get you a hotel, they'll fly the student athlete in, they'll pay for different expenses, whether it's dinners, things like that occur during the visit. You only get 5 of those total, and then everything else is going to have to be an unofficial visit. So you get 5 of those total between 5 different schools. Hopefully that answers that question a little bit. Next question: when contacting college coaches, is it better to contact the head coach or one of the assistants? I tell you what, as an assistant coach in the ACC, I received an average of 227 emails per day that were recruiting related. And that's just me as an assistant coach. I cannot imagine how many our head coach would receive. It's got to be, north of that by a good amount. But if you think about that, if you write me a page-long email, that would be like me reading 227-page book every single day. And that's always a challenge. So I always tell kids, hit the whole staff. And then as we start seeing a particular name multiple times, it really helps us in terms of jogging our memories, that, hey, this kid is really interested in my school. She knows something about my school, and she understands what she wants out of this process. So I definitely think you contact the whole staff and then see how it goes, because there's some staffs where the assistants are doing the primary identification of recruits and then passing it along to the head coach. But then there are other staffs that the head coach is the primary recruiter. So it's different for different staffs, and that might be a good question to ask them along the way as well. Is this different for different divisions? Would it be easier for a D3 school to come to a high school game? It definitely would. I think it would be easier for a D3 school to come to a high school game. Now, it just does depend on their schedule, because you still think the crossover is just the same, because their schedule is going to be a little bit shorter in the spring, whereas we start in February at the D1 level. They typically start a little bit later. So they may have a little bit more push there, but in the grand scheme of things, they're still playing games. They're still practicing in the same way that we do. So it is a lot more challenging to come to a high school game. And that's why typically you won't see a lot of college coaches at high school games. Dead period. What is the dead period? So dead period basically means that a college coach cannot reach out to a recruit during that period. Happens a few different times a year. It happens during the NFCA convention, also happens during the two signing periods, and it can also happen over different holiday periods. So you just have to you can look up NCAA dead period, and typically, or you can look up NCAA recruiting calendar on Google, and it will tell you, and for different sports, they're different. So understand that the dead period for football sometimes is different than the dead period for softball. So you have to look up the ones that are specific to softball. And yes, you can't, as a coach, I can't have a kid on grounds or on campus, I should say. And you definitely can't, be contacting people during that period. So you have to understand there's certain limitations to that. And coaches will know when that is, but make sure you look it up on the calendar so you're not trying to do a visit series during a dead period. I got a question of when are we going to do this type of thing again? I'd like my whole organization to hear you. We definitely can be contacted and we can take care of that for you guys. So please just email that info at fastpitchonlineshowcase.com and we'll take care of you. I've heard that the Ivy League schools are proposing changes to the early verbal process. What is my opinion? So opinion-wise, in the early verbal process, we as coaches, we're kind of like you guys. We're not fans of it, but then at the same time, there's still a process of having to keep up and compete to maintain our jobs. So it's kind of an ugly trade-off. We've had some different successes recruiting later. We've had different successes recruiting earlier. And then we've had, kind of, bad stories on both sides of that as well. But I think the more we get these early commitments, the more you're going to see transfers happen. And that's what you're kind of seeing now. There's a lot more transferring. There's a lot more decommitting happening from the kids that recruited, in 8th and 9th grade. And then by the time they get to that school, it's a completely different situation. So they're definitely trying to slow us down a little bit. I think there's a couple of different, options that I've heard, whether it's, we had a baseball coach mention to us that they were trying to think about actually signing kids. If you were going to verbal a kid, you would actually sign that kid early. So if you wanted to verbal them as a 9th grader, you would actually sign them as a 9th grader. And then you were committed to them no matter what. And they felt that doing that would curtail some of the early verbals and things like that, because that's saying pretty much, okay, as a 9th grader, I'm going to give this kid a full ride or whatever my scholarship was. And I was committed to that as a coach rather than being able to back down or having that kid be able to change his mind. And I thought that was an interesting take on it. But I think, kind of everybody involved is not a fan of the process, but we're all kind of, because of, the loopholes that exist within it, we're all kind of doing it. And unfortunately it's trickling down into the Division II and Division III area as well, and it's a challenging thing, especially on the recruiting end and with the recruits. I think they have a much harder time, trying to decide what is right for them at that early age. Okay, I think I've covered all of the questions that are currently there. If you have more questions, and I hope I see multiple people asked about the dead period. Yeah, the dead period is just, it's a period where you can't go visit schools and things like that. But please do look that up on the NCAA website. There's different calendars every year, and it kind of goes through, this is when you can visit and this is when you can't visit. I would also encourage, unofficial visits and even just drive-bys of schools are great for kind of figuring out where I as a student athlete feel like I would fit. It's great for parents to see kind of what their daughters are looking at and what interests them, and going through and figuring out, hey, I really want to be at a city school. I really want to be at a smaller school that maybe doesn't have football, or, I definitely want the big time football experience. Whatever the case is, I think trying to figure those things out early is great, because then it kind of narrows your focus and gets things going. So with that, I think we're going to wrap this up. If you have any other questions, we'll be doing other webinars along the way, but feel free to contact us, and we will take care of answering any questions that you or maybe your organization has, and then we'll go from there. But I appreciate you guys all attending, and have a good night.